What's going on, Lakers fans? Doug McCain here for the Lakers 24/8 podcast. It's a special day here because we have New York Times best-selling author Jeff Pearlman, former writer for Sports Illustrated. He's here with us. And, of course, he wrote the book Showtime, Magic, Kareem, Riley, and the Los Angeles Lakers dynasty of the 1980s, which is the source material for the hit new HBO show, Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. Jeff, thank you for joining us here on the Lakers 24/8 podcast.
Yeah, I love this stuff. Happy to do it.
Yeah, so Jeff, talk to me about just the show in general. Like, how long has this been in the works? Because I remember hearing about it years ago. You heard Adam McKay's name attached to it. It was about the casting, which we'll get into in just a second, because I think they knocked it out of the park with the casting. It was sensational. But how close was this project to not getting done? Was it in production hell at any point?
No, anyone who's had any kind of experience with these sort of projects, they're always long shots. Like, they're always long shots. Even when they don't seem like long shots, they're always long shots. And I wrote the book in 2014, so it's 8 years ago. And in that same year, a screenwriter named Jim Hecht visited me in my home, and back then in New Rochelle, New York, telling me that he had this basically vision for what this book could be, and it should be a TV series, and it could be like Friday Night Lights for basketball. And I never saw it happening. I never thought it would happen. I didn't really believe him. I had no faith. Through the years, there were a lot of meetings that came and went, a lot of highs and lows. Oh, it's really going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. But then I never thought it was going to happen. And then one day, Adam McKay is attached to it. And then HBO is attached to it. And all of a sudden, a couple weeks ago, I'm at a premiere party, walking down a purple carpet with my kids. All of it, it never felt inevitable. It always felt like it wasn't going to happen until it did happen.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite parts, one of my big takeaways from the first episode. It just feels so Adam McKay. It's eccentric. He's breaking the fourth wall. I'm sure that didn't really happen in real life where Jerry Buss is kind of talking to the audience the whole time. But I think that is what makes it such a great show and such an enjoyable show. And then talk about the casting. You got John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss. I think Quincy Isaiah as Magic Johnson. I remember seeing the trailers. As soon as he flashes that megawatt Magic Johnson smile, I'm like, that is the perfect casting for Magic Johnson. Jason Clark for Jerry West. A lot of people are talking about him, but just talk about the casting and just how they knocked it out of the park with it.
I just think they were really smart about it and really meticulous about it. And they didn't get lazy about it. They didn't, one thing I like is they didn't try to find, like, for the younger players, the Magic and Kareems, they didn't try to find famous actors where you would be like, oh, that's Michael B. Jordan playing Magic Johnson, just as an example. Like, it's not that way. It's, wow, that actually feels like Magic Johnson, and that feels like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And, Magic's character, Quincy Isaiah, was a Division III college football player from Kalamazoo College. Did college theater, and that's it. And then Solomon Hughes, who plays Kareem, he's a PhD. He never acted. He played center at Cal. He's in his 40s, like early 40s. He's a young looking guy, but he's, and they just really took it seriously. They didn't just go lazy. They didn't just go, who are the two most famous people we could get to play these characters? Like, who can we really get? Who really fits the sort of bill? And they did that with a lot of, it was really fun watching them cast this. And for a lot of young actors, it really was a dream maker. Like the guy who plays Michael Cooper, Delonte D'Souza. Like, this is all during COVID, so he auditioned via Zoom. He saw a casting call, auditioned via Zoom, sent in a basketball tape. He was not a good basketball player, but he's a really charming actor. And the guy who plays Mark Landsberger, Austin Aaron, was a football player at Cal. Not much basketball experience, but he kind of had this thing about him. I don't know, they were just really smart about it. And for a lot of young actors, it's all of a sudden you look up and you're starring on an HBO series with the Super Bowl ad and a show with Sally Field and Adrian Brody. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I think after the first episode, you saw Twitter going crazy about Jerry West. A lot of people are talking about Jason Clark and the portrayal of Jerry West. And look, you hear a lot about Jerry West and just how he was kind of tortured from his playing days. You saw he was able to win that championship in 1972, but he was tortured by those losses to the Boston Celtics. Now, was he that unhinged? Was he like they made him out to be in that first episode? Of course, we know that he famously did want to draft Sidney Moncrief over Magic Johnson, but let's not act like Sidney Moncrief was like Calvin Bowie or someone like that. I mean, he was a four-time All-Star, a guy who could score over 20 points per game. It did make a lot of sense when you see in that episode, you're talking about Jerry West saying, oh, the ball has to go up too high because he's 6'9". He smiles too much. That means he's soft. Was Jerry West really that adamantly against Magic Johnson, or was it just that he just liked Sidney Moncrief just a little more? How close to how accurate was the portrayal of that process?
Well, he definitely didn't want Magic. He wanted Sidney Moncrief. It wasn't like he was horrified by Magic Johnson. He just thought Sidney Moncrief would be a better fit. And in a lot of ways, he had a very sound argument. They had a great point guard in Norm Nixon. They had a center in Kareem. They had a great small forward, an all-star and future Hall of Famer in Jamal Wilkes. Like Sidney Moncrief would have been a great fill-in at the number 2, at the 2 guard. So, and this is way before Byron Scott came along. So they didn't have really a standard 2 guard. So it was wise. It just Magic Johnson was a generational sort of figure. So, in hindsight, obviously they did the right thing. As for the portrayal, it's definitely exaggerated. Like, he's super intense. He's hyper competitive. He could get angry on the, drop of a coin. But also you have to remember, and I always tell people this, it's TV and it's not a documentary, it's for entertainment. So, it's kind of par for the course that they take these characters and they take their certain characteristics and maybe they exaggerate them or stretch them out a little or heighten them a little, that, there are scenes that didn't happen, the way they did in real life, because that's what I always say. From every sports movie you like, name a sports movie you love. Remember the Titans, 42, oh, yeah. We Are Marshall, all of them. This is what happens with sports movies and movies in general. They take a true event and then they kind of add the Hollywood sprinkle to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was just kind of telling my friends. Like, they're going to take their creative liberties. This is a dramatized show. It's intended for entertainment. They weren't trying to make The Last Dance or something like that, or a 30 for 30. This is about entertainment. So I think that's a big takeaway for me as well. And yeah, when you mention the sports movies, I try not to look up kind of the origins of my favorite sports movies. I was a big Rudy fan, and I'm like, oh, you mean to tell me that Jersey thing never happened and stuff like that? And then remember, the Titans is extremely far-fetched. Like, I mean, it's just pretty much all fiction.
Wait, I just want to say, you never want to look this stuff up if you just love the movie, but I cannot help myself. I always look this stuff up. So like the Rudy Jersey thing is actually the perfect example. Like, it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. They didn't all walk in and put their jerseys down and say, oh, to let Rudy take my spot, right? But I think that's okay. Like, I really do, because I just think you go into a movie and you're not paying to see a documentary. You're paying to see a cinematic dramatization of events.
So who do you think gets the most credit for the Lakers landing Magic Johnson? Is it truly Jerry Buss?
Yeah, it is Jerry Buss. The show does not really exaggerate this idea that he wanted to turn basketball into entertainment, and that he saw this guy from Michigan State and he saw the bright smile. He saw what he did in the national championship game against Indiana State. And he just thought, this is a really special player, and like a special figure. And Jerry Buss was not a basketball expert by any means. He became more of one as he owned the team longer, but he was a chemist from Wyoming. But I do think he really did change the NBA by seeing the NBA as much more of an entertainment venue than just a basketball venue, and he saw it as you want to draw fans in, you want to get them to feel part of it. You want to get them to come to the forum and feel warm and embraced and leave saying, oh my God, guess who I saw at this game? Or guess what I saw at this game? Or holy crap, this was amazing. And Sidney Moncrief was a brilliant basketball player. He is a brilliant, brilliant basketball player. But I don't think you walked away from watching Sidney Moncrief play and feel like, wow, I feel great about myself. You walk away from Sidney Moncrief and you think, wow, that guy was a hell of a player. And Magic Johnson gave you the feels. He just did. There was something different about him.
Yeah, and I just actually don't think that Jerry Buss really gets enough credit for being the visionary, the innovator. He's the guy that really kind of ushered in this whole idea of sports entertainment. You're talking about the Forum Club and all the celebrities, the courtside seat. Do you think that he is the guy that really took sports entertainment to the next level?
I do, 100%. I think he was really smart. It really was smart. When you look at the modern NBA and you see every team having dancers and having piped in music and having, clubs you can go to in the arena, on and on and on. The NBA never had that. The NBA was a dead league when he showed up, and he really was a visionary. He just entertainment as much as basketball. That was basically his philosophy. It has to be as much entertainment as it is basketball. So I think there's a direct link between Jerry Buss and the modern NBA. I said to someone the other day, I don't know if Jerry Buss is actually in the Basketball Hall of Fame. If he's not, he definitely should be.
Yeah, tell me about the relationship between Jerry Buss and Magic Johnson. They just seem like they got along. Was it a father and son relationship? Was it a brother relationship? They seem like they were kindred spirits as soon as they met. Tell me about the relationship and the dynamic between Jerry Buss and Magic Johnson.
It was like older brother, younger brother. Jerry Buss definitely saw Magic as a kindred spirit. There's something to be said for, you arrive and this is the first guy you're drafting, and he happens to be this lovable. I mean, they both had similar narratives in a way. Blue collar backgrounds, came to LA chasing a dream, did it through basketball. I think too often we look at people and we say, especially people of different races, and we say they had nothing in common, but they got along. But no, they actually had a lot in common. These are two guys who, hard scrabble backgrounds, who worked really hard, who love the spotlight. LA was made for both of them. So it was like definitely older brother, younger brother, friend, not that much like owner player. It definitely broke that barrier.
Reading some of the stories about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they make him sound very aloof. And there's so many examples, like in your book, you talk about that story where the guy, he just has this baby and he sees Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and he gets out of his car and he tells Kareem Abdul-Jabbar this is the greatest day of his life and he just wants an autograph, and Kareem doesn't say anything to him at all, and then the guy just tells him to go F off, and then Kareem tells his friend, hey, I'm glad I didn't sign for that gentleman. Was he really this big of an a-hole? I mean, I just want to know a little more about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Was he really this aloof and just not engaging with fans?
Yeah, but I mean, everyone has an origin story, and everyone has a reason for being who they are. So on the surface, you definitely would be like, God, what an asshole. Why is he this way? And then, from the time he was little, he was basically this museum piece. He was taller than everyone at a young age. He was this basketball phenom at a young age. Everyone would point at him. Everyone would, he didn't like being the center of attention. He was always the center of attention. He hated it, just absolutely hated it. When he was the Laker and they were in the airport waiting for a flight, he would hide in a bathroom stall with a book because he just didn't want to be identified. Yeah. So yeah, he wasn't nice to people, but he just was awkward. It wasn't being a jerk as much as being really uncomfortable in his situation and probably in his skin. And the thing about when Magic came along is Magic was really good. Like, Magic was very deferential to Kareem from the beginning. They'd always call him Cap, never Kareem. Got him the ball, didn't complain about having to get him the ball. And I just think that relationship, it wasn't an off the court relationship at all. It's not like Magic and Kareem were hanging out ever, but they had a very good basketball relationship. It's rare that you get two generational talent. I mean, for my money, Kareem is the greatest basketball player of all time. If you take into account what he did at Power Memorial High School, then at UCLA, then in the NBA, and he has the greatest resume of anyone ever in basketball. So to have two guys of that talent level, arguably the greatest point guard of all time, arguably the greatest center of all time on the same team, it's pretty remarkable.
Just kind of talk about the difference between Kobe and Shaq versus Kareem and Magic.
Kareem and Magic didn't have the egos where they needed to be the quote unquote alpha. They came along in a different era, like a slightly different era, where there was no such thing as I'm the alpha. Like, it just wasn't a thing. Nobody covering the NBA back in the early 80s was asking who's the alpha of this team. It's a preposterous, stupid thing that came along later on. So if you had gone up to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1982 or whatever and said, "Who's the alpha?" He'd say, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." And Magic would probably say the same thing. And it's not like these guys didn't have egos. They did. They thought they were great, and they were great. But they didn't need to be reminded every 8 seconds how great they were. And it didn't have to be my team or your team. There's no point in his life Kareem Abdul-Jabbar uttered the words, "This is my team," you know? And Shaq and Kobe both viewed it that way. And it really was a byproduct of sort of generational shifts, of media expectations, of the growth of the NBA. You know, they were just I wouldn't say Magic was a humble guy, but he sort of knew his role, and he really just wanted to win more than anything. And I'm not saying Shaq and Kobe didn't want to win very much. They did, but they wanted to do it being quote unquote the man. And I don't think Shaq or Kobe ever gave two craps about being the man. I mean, Kareem or Magic.
Do you think that Jerry West is the greatest general manager of all time?
Hard to say. I mean, there have been a lot of really good ones. I think he did something really well, though. And the same thing like Jerry Krause in Chicago. Everyone talks about Jerry Krause. Well, you got Jordan and you got Pippen. Well, first of all, he traded for Pippen with Seattle. And what makes really good GMs, in my opinion, are the little small deals that you don't really think about that much. The little, additive players like, the Lakers had, like you mentioned, Michael Thompson. Nobody talks about Michael Thompson when they talk about the legacy of the Lakers. But Michael Thompson was a huge addition. And there's Jerry West. People think of AC Green, but they don't think of, he was a low draft pick. First-round draft pick, but a low first-round draft pick. There were a lot of flaws in his game. He didn't have much offensive talent, but Jerry West saw in him what he needed, which is kind of a Kurt Rambis plus. They're just a lot of like little pieces. The Byron Scott trade. I mean, they gave up Norm Nixon. The Clippers had drafted Byron Scott. The Lakers traded Norm Nixon to the Clippers for the rights of Byron Scott. Laker fans were pissed off, man. Norm Nixon was a freaking part of this franchise. He was a championship player. He was a really good-looking, savvy, cool guy. But Jerry West pulled the trigger. The only time Jerry Buss tried to go around Jerry West is he agreed with Dallas to trade Mark Aguirre for James Worthy. And Jerry West said to Buss, "If you pull off this trade, I quit. I'm not doing this. I will quit." And he didn't do it because he just knew it was a stupid trade. So he was just really, really savvy and smart, knew the team he wanted, knew the plug-in pieces, where they needed to be, who they needed to be, how they needed to fit. So, yeah, I mean, is he the greatest of all time? I don't know, but he's definitely one of them.
Tell me about Pat Riley and all this. Do you think that he was kind of the glue when it came to the Showtime Lakers? Do you think that he was the perfect guy, the perfect fit? He had the suits, the slick back hair. He looked like he was cast to be the coach of the Lakers at the time. How big was Pat Riley when it came to the Lakers' success in the Showtime era?
I mean, he was kind of everything. I mean, he wasn't the first coach. The first coach was Jack McKinney. He had his bike accident. Second coach was Paul Westhead. He did lead them to a championship. But Riley is, Riley was the guy who pieced it all together. He was the guy who understood dynamics, understood human relations, for the most part, knew when to push the players hard, when to back off, knew what to ask of them, knew how to play Kareem to not wear him out, made Magic Johnson his kind of partner, which was helpful because he's a point guard. I mean, Riley's the real deal. Anyone who thinks like, every now and then you hear people criticize Phil and say, well, he was handed, Jordan and Pippen, Shaq and Kobe. I mean, these guys are great. A lot of bad coaches have had great players. Like, great coaches know how to work them. And freaking Riley, if Riley's not the greatest coach in NBA history, he's easily in the top three with Phil and Red. So, yeah, hugely important.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest surprises from reading your book was that Jerry Tarkanian was almost the coach of the Lakers. I had no idea about that. Can you tell me a little bit about that story?
Well, he was Jerry Buss's first choice, and Jerry Buss wanted a splash as a first coach. And Tarkanian was a big guy at UNLV, and they agreed to a deal. And then a couple of days after they agreed to a deal, Tarkanian's agent was found dead in the trunk of his car, killed by mobsters. And Tarkanian was really shaken by that. and decided not to leave the comfy confines of UNLV and leave for LA. So had that not happened, we're probably never talking about the Pat Riley era. Maybe we're talking about the so Jerry Tarkanian era.
I want to ask you a little bit about Russell Westbrook. Do you think that if Jerry West was the GM and Jerry Buss was the owner, do you think that they would have made that trade for Russell Westbrook?
I mean, it's kind of apples and oranges because it's such a different generation, and the amount of power that LeBron and Clutch have with the Lakers is, not anything of past generations. It was obviously a stupid trade. I'm sure the Lakers regret it every day of their lives. It's a weird team. It's a really weird team. It's a team built like a kid who just ate a lot of sugar and went back and did a fantasy draft from 2016. It just doesn't make sense. Nothing about that roster makes sense at all. So, no, do I think Jerry West would have constructed this team? No way. It's a horribly constructed team. It's one of the worst constructed teams I've ever seen. That doesn't mean it's one of the worst teams I've ever seen. It's just so poorly constructed. Everything about it is just a complete crap show. So, I mean, none of it makes sense. Carmelo doesn't make sense. Westbrook certainly doesn't make sense. Having had DeAndre Jordan didn't make sense. With Dwight Howard didn't make sense. None of this team makes sense. It is a bizarre. The only reason they're even in slight contention or in contention for playoffs is because they have enough talent, like floating around, and you have LeBron, but they're a mess. I can't think of a team that's been built this poorly. It doesn't mean they're the worst team I've ever seen. It just means I can't think of a team that's been built this poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I call it the Lake shit show. I mean, you see this roster, they were designed to be top heavy, and with Anthony Davis and LeBron James missing significant time, you really can't expect someone like Russell Westbrook to just carry this team. When you surround him with young talent and minimum salary guys, it's just not going to work. But yeah, also you're kind of relegating him to being a spot up shooter. They're playing him a lot in the pick and roll. It's just been probably one of the most unenjoyable years I can think of. And I've watched the Lakers for my entire life. I mean, it is bad. But yeah, getting back to your point about LeBron James and kind of the power structure of the Lakers. Now, there's two ways I kind of think of it. Like, of course, LeBron James, he wanted to be in LA. He wanted to expand his brand in Los Angeles and begin his post-career career as a producer. You see his show HBO The Shop. I mean, when I think about that 2020 championship, I don't know really how I divvy up the credit. Do I give Magic the credit? Do I give Genie the credit? Do I give Space Jam 2 the credit? Do I give COVID the credit? Do I give LeBron the credit? But I do think that, look, I've been calling the Los Angeles Clutchers for a couple years, and I do think that when you kind of empower LeBron like Genie did and this organization, I do think that kind of sets a precedent that you don't want to see moving forward. Do you think that the power structure of the Lakers has kind of sort of become toxic?
I mean, I don't think it's ever healthy when a player has that much power. I don't have a problem with players having power at all, and I think you should make as much money as you want, like as you can. That's more power to you. You should. I just don't think it's healthy when players have that much control over an organization and you're actually hanging on the whims and words and emotions of your star. It's just not a healthy way. So I don't know. They always had a very defined power structure, and it feels like they've given a little of that away. And I think it's you won a championship. That's great, but it seems like you might have a few bleak years coming up here. Based on sort of the organization of the
and that championship was like forever ago, you know what I mean, for Laker fans. I mean, was it 2020? I mean, talk
to a New York Jet fan or
that's right,
Brown fan. You know, it is funny how often Laker fans are a weird group. I've only lived in Southern California for 7 years, and you guys act like Laker fans act like they haven't won a championship since, you know, Elgin Baylor's heyday. Like, it's insane. You won a championship a year and a half ago. But
oh my God, it's the curse, man. It's the 1 year curse.
Yeah, horrible.
I mean, it's terrible, but okay, I'm gonna let you go pretty soon. But I just have a couple more questions. I want to ask you about Jeannie Buss. I mean, I've heard you say in other interviews that Jeannie Buss and Linda Rambis, they were really great to work with when you were writing the book. I want to talk to you a little bit about Jeannie Buss and the way she owns the team, the way that she gets advice as far as the direction of this franchise. There was some talk that she had been in contact with Phil Jackson. You saw Phil Jackson. He was at the Warriors game. What do you think about the way she runs the team and the brain trust of the Lakers? When you come to Ramby and Linda Rambis and Kurt Rambis, do you think it's time for her to expand her horizons and kind of branch out from this Lakers family?
I don't know, actually. I don't really have a great answer for you. I mean, the reality is she's had a lot of success. The Buss family has had a lot of success running this team. And Jeannie's definitely smart, and she's definitely savvy, and she clearly wants to win. And it's kind of funny. Linda Rambis has taken a lot of heat through the years. And I'm just being honest, she's kind of one of my favorite people in sports. I'm like a truly decent human being. And I that is not a defense of basketball decisions or her role in the team. But I do feel like this team won a championship a year and a half ago. Like, seriously, they won a championship a year and a half ago. And people are acting like everything is, a nightmare and this is the worst and we need to get rid of everyone. The whole organization is blah, blah, blah. I think, I don't think it's the same as it used to be. I don't think the NBA is the same as it used to be. Everything's gone a little more corporate. It's kind of a bummer. But I don't really have a great answer. I don't know. I just don't know.
Talking with her, do you think that she would ever consider, I mean, she's the controlling owner of the Lakers. She has said in the past that if they were ever going to sell the Lakers, it would be a family decision. Do you ever foresee a situation where she would consider selling the team?
No. She loves owning the Lakers. She loves the Lakers. She loves the Lakers. And a lot of it is because of her father and his legacy. A lot of it is because she just enjoys it. This is what her life is. She is a basketball team owner and an NBA executive. And I think she takes that very seriously. And I'm not defending her record. You could think what you want, but I don't see them selling this franchise. At least not in my lifetime.
We'll get you out of here on this. I want to get you a rapid round if you're cool with that. Just some quick questions, and then we'll get you out of here.
Go ahead.
All right, cool. Most underrated player from the Showtime Lakers?
Michael Cooper.
Who wins a 7-game series? The peak Showtime Lakers, let's say 86, 87 era, or the 2001 three-peat Lakers with Shaq and Kobe?
I think probably the Magic Kareem Lakers are a better team.
Who got more ladies, Magic or Jerry Buss?
Oh, Jerry Buss, by far.
Jerry Buss, really?
Yeah, definitely.
God, what a legend. Shaq or Kareem?
Kareem. And I love Shaq, but Kareem.
Kobe or Magic?
Magic. And okay. I love Kobe, but Magic.
Okay, so last one. If we're talking all time, who deserves the title as Mr. Laker?
Magic.
Winning Time. It's an absolute hit. You have to watch it. His book, Showtime, the story of the 80s Showtime Lakers. It's essential reading for all Laker fans. Be sure to pick it up. You can pick it up on Amazon. Mr. Jeff Pearlman, appreciate it. If anything you want to talk about, anything you want to plug at the end, just let me know here. But thanks for joining us, my man.
My pleasure. I got nothing. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, Mr. Pearlman.
All right. Take care.